Okay, this video is going to cover texture painting in Substance Painter. Here's our model. We have its UVs set from the previous video. I have two materials and parts and material. I put a standard surface shader on here. I'm actually going to change this to a Fong for both of these materials. So this was the body material. And then let's go back to the model. And this will also change to a Fong. It's just a Maya Legacy shader, but it will export out of Maya better. So then again, this is going to be parts material. Okay. And so I have my UVs, I have my materials for the parts and for the body. My model has been smoothed after I've done the UVs, and I also have deleted all the history on it. So we are ready to go. I'm going to say File and Export Selection with the Rhino Geo selected, the mesh selected. So File, Export Selection, and I'm going to export this as an FBX. If you don't see this as a file type here, you are going to want to go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and then make sure we can scroll down or Google it or search for it here. And we want this FBX to Maya plugin loaded, auto-loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, Export Selection, and FBX, and I'm going to say Rhino, and it's going to be an FBX. I'm going to just export it into my Scenes folder. And now let me go and open up Substance Painter. Okay, so now in Substance Painter, I'm going to go to File and New. And there's a bunch of different templates for the different channels that we can texture and create texture files for. So I'm just going to use this PBR Metallic Roughness Starter asset, this first one here. This will give us a channel for metallic, which for an animal doesn't necessarily matter, but we also can do height map, bump mapping, and the color channel, and then kind of diffuse or roughness. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm going to select my file. And again, it's going to be this Rhino FBX. I'm going to say open. And then for the document resolution, I recommend working in like a 2K 2048. This is going to be the document size or the texture sizes that get exported out of Substance Painter once we're done, which are going to be PNG files. They're square PNG files that then will plug into the different channels and be applied to the UVs that we've created. Let's go ahead and hit OK. So now I have my UVs here. This is my texture set list, my body and the parts. They are separated here. We have on one side, we have our model, and we can operate in Substance Painter the same as we would in Maya, which is like Alt and left to toggle, Alt and middle to pan, and Alt and right to zoom in and out. And we can also, use Alt and middle to move around the UVs if we need to. Alt and right to zoom in a smooth way, or use the scroll wheel on your mouse. We also have here under the environment this display settings, we have an environment map. We can change this, and this will give us a kind of dynamic lighting on our model so we can see what it might look like if it has a kind of HDR image that's mapped to the lighting system. So we can change what that lighting will look like. We have like an interior, or maybe we can do any one of those. Glazed patio is fine. And then if you press shift and then right mouse button, you can kind of rotate that lighting, that dynamic lighting around your model. And then it also here is applied in the UV panel as well. Okay, so to model or to texture your model, you can paint directly onto the model, or you can paint onto the UVs. And we have under this texture set list, which lists the different materials, we have this layer list. So these kind of operate the same way that Photoshop layers do. And we're going to build up a bunch of different texture layers here. And then down here we have our paint properties. This first panel, these are our assets here. So we have these kind of standard we have this group of assets or materials, but what I'm going to do actually is use some of the other tools that are here, the other assets that are here. So we have brushes. I quite like the brushes. We also have these alpha channels. So we're going to get started here with I guess the first thing I can do is I can add like a fill layer rather than a brush layer. So this is just a regular paint layer, but I can add a fill layer. And what that'll show you here is what some of our options are for the fill. This properties panel here, you can scroll down through it all, or you can kind of click these tabs, and that will um, bring you down to whatever part of the properties panel you've selected. So this is the material panel. And right now, I just want to say I want to affect maybe the color and maybe the roughness. And the roughness is that kind of way that light's going to either be really sharp and kind of bounce off the object in a bright way, or it's going to be more diffuse. And then, so really what I have is roughness and base color. So if I turn up the roughness, you'll see, turn it down and we have a more metallic, not necessarily metallic, but this almost looks like a glazed ceramic. We turn that up and the roughness is really the diffuse, the specularity is really diffuse. So I think for an animal skin, I want that all the way up. And then the base color, I do have an image of the rhino that I have here in my preview, and I'm going to use this maybe as a source image for how I want some of the skin to appear. So let me go back and maybe select a gray. Now, one thing I've noticed is that our textures out of Substance Painter into Maya are a good deal darker. So there are ways that we can fix that, but just to keep that in mind that what you see here is significantly lighter than what is going to be applied in Maya. So I just chose a base color, it got applied, and I also changed the roughness here. That's my base. I can delete this layer. I don't need it. And instead, I'm going to add another paint layer. And then maybe in my paint layer, I'm going to find, I quite liked this kind of crack brush, and I can change the size of the brush here. And then I can also say if I go down to my material, this I want to affect the height. It already by default is just affecting the height. And in this case, this is going to either kind of lift or give the appearance of lifting the material in this. This is the alpha channel. As you can see, like what's white is going to either in this case like depress in or raise up. So I'll depress it in, and then if I just kind of, you can see what that looks like here. I can start to kind of paint a texture onto the model. Now, if this feels a little bit too intense on, or I'm going to maybe go backwards here. There's a couple ways that I can maybe change I'm going to scroll up here to the brush settings. Maybe I want to change the opacity, maybe cut that down a little bit so it's not making as much of a bump map, or not as strong as a bump map as the other. And then maybe I also can, in the layer here, I can change the opacity of the layer so that it's not affecting. Let's see if it's going to, this should change the opacity, but potentially, um, yeah, that should change the opacity, but maybe not for a height map. But I might kind of use this to start to texture a kind of skin on the rhino. And then if I don't like what I'm doing, I can kind of like hide this layer or trash it, start again. Maybe I need my brush size to be smaller. Maybe I want my stroke opacity to be lower, or even I can bring that height up, and maybe that's a little bit better. Now this might take a while to paint, but I'm just gonna go ahead. Maybe I will skip ahead in the video while I paint this bump map over my rhino skin. Okay, looks like maybe around the legs too. So I can go back here and let's see how else I want to be adding some bump texture and then some color to this model. There's some skin textures here, and or we can look in the material library and look for skin. And so I've added this to the top layer. I might move it to the bottom. And now it's just added a kind of height overall. So I have some of that, some of the more detailed um, texturing, maybe on the shoulders, and then this will give me an overall kind of modeled kind of skin appearance. I might go back into the legs. Let's see if I use that cracked, this is different elephant skin, spray skin, and make sure I'm working in the right layer. I still have this as my brush. So instead, let's try to use maybe this brush. And this is, now let's try maybe another layer, um, another brush layer. And maybe this time I'll make the height raised so it's a little bit different. And this isn't changing the actual surface, the mesh itself. This is just changing the appearance of the model by adding a bump map. So if we zoom in, we're not actually raising the vertices on the model itself. And let's work on the face maybe a little bit, texture the face a bit more. And let's add another layer. I should be labeling these layers so I know what's what, but I can also just kind of turn them off and on and see the progress that I've made. Let's maybe add something to the height. And now, rhinos have many more interesting features with their skin that I could have maybe modeled into it or maybe should have modeled into it. I can try my best to kind of paint a texture on that will mimic that. I think I'd really need to be looking at this to uh, see if I can kind of pull up both of these windows next to each other. I think this is really needs me to be working with a tablet rather than my mouse to get some of this for that flow to really work. But we can just kind of get a sense of some of the options that we maybe have to fix some of the folds of the skin and things that are missing. I think with a lot of work we could make this look really good, but I, in the interest of time, might kind of cut this part of it short. Um, let's go to our parts and let's maybe add just a kind of dark material to, let's paint, let's paint in the color channel, kind of dark black for the eyes. Make sure we have our opacity up. I'm still in that brush that has maybe some texture on it, but I'm just going to kind of paint these. I also want to maybe be painting in the rough channel and painting in like a very matte black eye sockets and maybe the nose as well. And the tail, let's select maybe this color to paint the tail. And we'll want to also, let's add another layer. And then this can be for the height. Let's go back to the tail here and try to fix the tail. Kind of a lighter, get a lighter color on that tail. Blend in a little bit more with the skin. There's also the brush that's kind of helpful is if I search for fur, I can find some fur, maybe add that fur to the height, and the rough shore we'll just have it be both, and start to add some fur to the tail. And now let's maybe consider the horn. And again, maybe another layer for this, another paint layer. Let's add a much lighter gray. And I don't want to be painting the roughness. I just want to be, or the height. I want to just be maybe focused on the color channel here. Oh, and I'm painting like a fur on there, which I don't want. So I'll pick a different brush. Maybe I want a little bit of variation in the texture. So I'll go to my brushes and maybe X out of fur and be in brushes. Let's see what might be a good brush to maybe add a bit of variation to the base color. Maybe a little bit of some spotted. And then maybe even for this, we'll add a little bit of texture. So I will add another node, and this one will be for the height. Let's make this brush size much smaller and add some texture to the horn itself in some spots. I'm going to go back now. And then the mouth. I think the mouth, I will paint kind of a darker. The mouth looks kind of ridiculous right now, but hopefully I can animate this with blend shapes later. So let me go in and color. And maybe I'll just put a fill layer for, oop, I don't want to do the fill layer. I could do a fill layer and then I could mask it. So let's see if I do the fill layer, give it a darker color, and then maybe I can add a mask, add a black mask, and then I'll paint that mask here. So, so just that is affected. Okay, so I think maybe just back to the body. Let's put a little bit of a darker color into the ears here. Okay, so now I'm done painting my textures and I'm going to say File, Export Textures. I can save the project. Let's do that first. Let's save this as Rhino SPP project, so a Substance Painter project, and then I'll say Export Textures. Now I want to make sure that I'm exporting the textures to change this output directory, and not here. I'm going to say I want it in my source images folder of my project folder in Maya. So that's where I want them to export to. PNGs are fine. This is the output template, and I just say export. So now we have all of those different channels that we can apply in and link into Maya. We have them as individual files here. Let's go to our, right here they are in my source image folder, my project folder, all of those different channels. So we have our color channel for the and this will apply to the UVs, so everything that we've kind of painted for the parts, and then the body itself. So let's go back into Maya now. And with the body material, I'm going to go ahead and start to add a texture node into the color channel of this material. And I'll add a file node, and then I'm going to find that base color for the body and say open. And then I'm going to hit 6 on my keyboard. Okay. So then I'm going to want to go back to the material node. And then in the bump map, I'm going to link in here, file 2, and height for the body material. Okay. And then I'm going to link into body material. Let's find this again. And maybe it's diffuse. Let's see. For a Fong, we'll do the roughness. And that didn't seem to do anything for that channel. So instead, I'm just going to say reflectivity. And let's bring it down and also bring this color down so it's very matte. Let's do the same thing for our parts. So we'll go to our parts material, and then in the color channel, click this, click this render node button to then choose a file, and then find it for the base color for the parts. And then we can say, go back up to the material node, and then in the bump map, we can link in that height map, which will just add a little detail to our horn in some places. Okay, and then so there's my textured model. I can go ahead and say File, Save Scene As, Rhino, Textured, Texture, and then of course just good practice is to edit, delete all by type history here, just in case. But I have now all of my materials are now applied to my model.